What's up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to Casual Friday. Once again, huge Q&A to work through, so I'm going to do another lightning round. As of next week, I am probably going to have too many Q&A questions per video to answer all of them, which means that I'm going to have to start editorializing a little bit as to who gets their questions answered. There are a lot of questions that people ask in these videos that I have answered in previous videos, so you might want to go through previous videos' questions indexes to find out if I've already answered them before you ask a question, and generally if I don't answer a question, it's probably because I've already answered it to some degree in another video. This week I am already getting off to a great start with the whole New Year's resolution of posting my videos at midnight. I've just had a lot to do, and so last night I didn't get to make this Casual Friday video, but now I get to answer some of these questions that wouldn't have gotten answered if I had done it last night. So why don't I get to the Q&A, and we start off with Jeff Badilla asking, RJB0, how do you think Infernities can do against Necros if Infernity Archfiend came back to 3? Well, first of all, your premise is absolutely ridiculous, because Konami is not going to bring Infernity Archfiend back to 3 in the foreseeable future, because the cards that were the problems were not the cards that Konami was hitting originally, which were the cards that support Infernities once they finish the loop. The problem was the loop, and Archfiend was the source of the loop. So Konami finally hit Infernities after years and years of releasing indirect support for Infernities and accidentally making it a tier 1 deck and knocking a bunch of decks out of the meta and making a huge profit sink. So first of all, your question has a terrible premise, but second of all, I think that Infernities, of course, would do well against Necklaws. Infernities are one of the fastest decks ever created, and if Infernities got 3 Archfiend, they'd probably do pretty well. Anytime99 asks, what do you feel will be the best way to play Heroes after the structure deck is released? Also, what is your opinion on Shadow Heroes? Those are like the two things that get splashed the most, are Heroes and Shadows. Like, if somebody's going to try and make a splashable deck, it's always going to be some combination of Heroes and Shadows. I mean, aside from, like, hands, trap tricks, and artifacts, but that's completely different. The point being, I think that Shadow Heroes probably does not have a huge amount of synergy, since you have to actually get the heroes on the board in order for them to be any use. Heroes aren't any good to you in the hand, which means that you have to use up your normal summon on a hero, which means that all the cards that make Shadows good, like Mathematician and Denko Sekka, are unusable, because you're already using your normal summon to get all your hero stuff going. Also, you can't really use Shadow Mist's effect effectively, because you have to special summon it in order for it to work really well. I realize that Shadow Mist can get its effect off if you use it with a fusion and then get another monster from your deck to your hand, but aside from that one effect, Heroes and Shadows have very little synergy. As far as the best build, I'd say that the Masked Hero focus is probably going to be the best. We might see a couple of Shadowblade players just because of Nick Gibson, but honestly I think that the Masked Hero build is more consistent, and you're going to see a couple of splashable things. I definitely think we're going to be seeing hands in Heroes in the near future, partially because you can make, Ab-Zero and you can make Nova Master, which are two amazing cards, but mostly because hands have an amazing matchup against Cliff Wars. Hashtag Chaos Emperor Dragon to 1 asks, what do you think of the card Ring of Pace, and do you think it will see any play within the meta? For those of you who do not know, Ring of Peace is a recently announced OCG card that is a normal spell, which says to activate this card, you must draw it for your normal draw in your draw phase, while your opponent controls 3 or more monsters and you control no cards. Reveal it and keep it revealed until the start of main phase 1. At the start of your main phase 1, that same turn, you can add 1 card from your deck to your hand, which means that you can add any card in your deck to your hand. And the problem that I have with this card is that it's incredibly conditional for an effect that you should essentially be getting out of your deck anyway. Your best cards in a deck should almost always be searchable. That's why a bunch of the top tier decks right now are top tiers, because most of their best cards are searchable, which means that this card does not actually improve your game that much. I would say if they're going to run something like this, run freaking Rank Up Magic the 7th one, which at least gives you a giant beater that negates all cards on the field. Like, I don't know why you would run this card. Tap Kara asks, will you switch to Necros when they come out or stick with Cliff Wards? I'm actually probably going to be getting rid of Cliff Wards fairly immediately after Secrets of Eternity come out. I think I'm going to play it for a little while and then try and get rid of the deck, just because I think that the dark decks are going to be better post-Dark Law and Vast Change the second. So I'm probably not going to play Necloths, but I am not certain whether or not I'm going to keep my Clifforts. Andrew Smith asks, what are your thoughts on Fire Fists in the current meta? They are terrible because their best strategies are destroying and they only have one spirit. If 3-Axis was a better deck, then I think that Fire Fist would see some play. However, with Spirit at 1, Fire Fists are not really going to see any play, because without Spirit at multiples, you're going for a 4-Axis build, which is entirely focused on destruction and the creation of rank 4s, which are not especially great in the current meta. Saber Selections asked, will UA be competitive this format? Probably not. I was expecting them to get some more good cards, and most of the cards that they got from Secrets of Eternity are pretty bad. So I think that they're going to look essentially like they are right now. Angel Gonzalez asks, what is your opinion on the card lores within the Hidden Arsenal / Secret Forces packs? I freaking love the recent card lores. Konami has done an amazing job at fitting together all the stories that they've come up with so far, and it's just amazing lore. I might talk about it in another video. Soaring Revo asks, how old are you? I'm 20. The Will P89 asks, when are you going to do another live stream? They're insightful while also being very entertaining. Well, I have to do live streams kind of on a different schedule, because once I'm in Bellingham, my locals will be on Sundays. So I'll have to do Last Week in Yu-Gi-Oh! On Saturday as opposed to Sunday, and then I'll have to not be able to do Saturday duels necessarily. I might have to find another day for that, or just cut that out entirely. Daniel Shogun asks, if you want to become a Yugi-tuber, how would you go about starting to do that? I would say, if you have a decent camera, and you have a desk lamp that you can shine in your face, like literally, that is how I do my lighting. I shine a desk lamp in my face. If you can find a camera and that, and you think you have a good thing to discuss, or you want to make deck profiles and stuff like that, just start putting out content. The way I started this, I put out a bunch of content, and then I figured out which content was the most successful and which content I enjoyed making the most, and then I focused on that. That's how it happened. George Flores asks, hey RJ, I'm looking to invest into a good competitive deck with a budget of $200. Any ideas? I think it is plausible that you can invest in Clifforts with that. Probably not once Turnover Soul comes out, but as it is right now, Clifforts are kind of in I bet you could probably get it for under 200. If not, Mermails is a great way to go. It's a very cheap deck right now, and I think that it will be fairly competitive in the near future. Andre Cruz asks, what do you think of mixing Horus with Shadows? Are we talking about, like, the Dark Flame Dragon? As in, like, level 6 and level 8? I don't see any synergy, because one of them requires, like, any archetype which requires monsters to be on the field is probably not going to be incredibly synergistic for Shadows. The exception being Lightsworns, because Lightsworns have an effect which triggers Shadow monsters, so they have a degree of synergy in that you can normal summon them and then get Shadow monsters effects, as opposed to most of the archetypes that people suggest for splashing into Shadows, which they have to be on the field in order to get their effects, and their effects themselves have very little synergy with Shadows. Chateau Chat asks, do you think Konami could make a quick play targeting or a continuous spell or trap that would allow named once per turn effects to be used twice or even 3 times? It would be a ruling's nightmare, but you could probably do it, and I'm not certain if they would do it in the future. The reason why they're creating these named once per turn effects is to make sure that they are less loopable, and if you create a card which gets around that, then that kind of defeats the point. And a lot of these named once per turn effects are pretty amazing as they are, and they're pretty abusable as they are, so I don't see why Konami would put out a card which allows you to use them multiple times in a turn. OMG Wafflebee asks, can you share with us a random fact about yourself that's non-Yu-Gi-Oh! Related? Well, some of you may know that I am a journalist, but I'm also a writer of various other sorts. I have been doing a lot of speech writing in my college career, and I also have just started on my very first work of fiction. David Casimir asked why I didn't answer his question in the last Q&A. I think he's talking about the one where he asked about his locals stealing from him, and I think that I didn't answer it because I didn't feel like I had the legal standing to answer it. Like, not like I could get sued for answering it, but like I didn't know the legal stuff that would have to go into it, because when a business steals from you, that's a really big deal, and you made it look like there was a lot of money. And so I would say that that is advice to take to a lawyer or to the police or something like that, not to me. He also asked, what do you see in the following decks next format? And he lists Insector, Dino Rabbit, Fire Fist, Noble Knight, and Harpies. I think they're all going to be awful next format. I'm sorry, it's just kind of the truth. All of them have premises that are either incredibly limited or in the current format, or are just really bad against the current decks. Cheeseburger asks, do you think Evil Swarms are going to be good next format? It's plausible. I think Evil Swarms are kind of the exception to my rule about recent rogue decks being really bad, and I mean, Evil Swarms aren't really a recent rogue deck, but you guys get the idea. I think that they have the potential to be really good, particularly since Heroes and Shadows and what's it called? What is that deck called? What's it called? Neckloths are going to be really good. I would say it's something to look into. I'd say that you have to look out for Neckloth Unicorn, but that's pretty much it. Dragon Coma asks, can you do a discussion as to whether or not wind-ups will ever come back? I think that they are definitely going to see a couple of boosts on the list, but by the time that they see a couple of boosts on the list, unless Konami has made some cool new support for it, I don't think they're ever going to come back as a deck. At least not competitively. Ethan B12007 asks, do you think Thousand Eyes Restrict could come back? Not as long as Instant Fusion is legal. He also asks, what is your least favorite deck and or deck type, and why do you dislike it? Final Countdown and decks of its ilk, because the point of the deck is to make sure that the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Never gets played, and if the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Never gets played, you win. That's all that the deck does. Darkness Approaches asks, what do you think about the Train archetype? I think that it's really good. We've seen it in the OCG doing some really cool stuff, and the Super Dreadnought cannon that they have is just freaking amazing. It's like giant Felgrand. I think that if it came to the TCG, it would definitely see Tier 2 play, if not Tier 1 play. Destroyer831642 asks a slew of questions. We'll start with, if you could only use one form of extra deck summoning from here on out, besides pendulums, which would you use? Synchro summoning. Absolutely. I love synchros. Second question along those lines, what do you think about the 2 new synchros we saw in the most recent episode of Arc 5? I haven't been watching Arc 5. 3, another thing, what do you think about Warrior returning alive in competitive play in Warrior-type decks like Heroes or Tellarknights? I don't see it being really necessary in either of those decks, although I have seen it see play in a couple of older decks. It's unnecessary right now because of the amount of revival we have, and with the amount of revival we have and the kind of support that Heroes and Tellarknights have, special summoning from the graveyard is much preferable to adding from the graveyard to hand. He also asks a rulings question. If Gigaplant is special summoned via Rose Lover's effect, then he is normal summoned as a Gemini monster. If it battles with El Shaddai Construct, will it be destroyed by Construct effect or by battle? Gigaplant is considered to be both special summoned and normal summoned, so it would be destroyed by Construct effect before it is destroyed by battle. Clifford Adam asks, what does brick mean? You use the term or phrase a lot during this video, but even with context clues, it's tough to figure out what it really means. Brick means that you get a totally unusable hand. Team Innovation Yu-Gi-Oh! Asks, thoughts on King Tiger Wangu versus the Burning Abyss matchup. In theory, it's a great card in the Burning Abyss matchup, since the only thing that they have that won't get killed by it is Seer, and the problem with it is that it is a monster card. It's therefore easy to get rid of through things like Phoenix Wing Windblast, or if you're going second, your opponent might have a Fire Lake. It's really bad against established fields. Matthew1154 asks if Bujinte Susanoo can attack every Yang Zing monster that your opponent summons in a turn. Yes, it can. The Divergency asks, you said in an earlier video that TG Stun needed Tengu back in order to affect the meta. Now that Tengu is at 3, what is its effect going to be on the meta? Well, I also said that it needed something better than Skill Drain to run on. The problem with TG Stun is that one of its main strategies was to activate Skill Drain and then just run over monsters with Horn of the Phantom Beast. But Skill Drain right now really isn't that great against the meta. The only thing it's decent in is Clifforts, and that's because it increases their attack while stopping your opponent's plays. In TG Stun, it really only increases the attack of Barbaros. The Divergency also asks, how do you teach a complete noob how to be a good player with a lot of patience and explaining and videos and making them watch good players play? Ara Storm asks, do you think Artifact Lancia will see more play when Neckloths come out? Possibly. I don't think it's the best card for countering Neckloths, but we might see play. He also asks, do you think Konami will finally release the long-awaited OCG exclusives such as Neverdeskin, the new Premium Gold, now that Moral Talk is at 1? I think we have the entire list for Premium Gold and none of them are in there. But I think that it is plausible that we will see Neverdisc and Nodin and such be released now that Moral Talk is at 1. He also asked, do you think Dragon Ice is worth a shot in Mermails? I think it depends on what you think your hardest matchups are going to be. If you see yourself playing against a lot of Cliffwort players, possibly, because it allows you to take out Scout with an infantry during your opponent's turn. WheezyLeaf90383 asks, have you ever played any alternative formats, and do they interest you? Can playing other formats make you a better player? There are some other formats that are really good for becoming a better player. For instance, Imaginary Yu-Gi-Oh! But I have mostly played Highlander format as an alternate format. That's where you have a 60-card deck and you only get one of each card, and there's a special Forbidden and Limited list. Jimmy Bellamere asks, what do you think about the normal Pendulum deck? I think it's fun as a casual deck, but I don't think it's going to be competitive. Yule Franz asks, do you think Artifact Scythe is going to be a decent replacement for Moral Talk? I think it depends on your matchups. I probably wouldn't use it, but I mean, it's there. Yule Franz also asks, can the Artifact engine with Scythe do a lot with heroes and more decks like Synchrons that will abuse the extra deck? Once again, it really depends on how often you're going to be facing against them, but I think honestly, there are probably better ways to go about it. He also asks, why do you run Econ in Shadows? It's to get over the Vanities and Majesties fiends. M. Stranger asks, do you think Konami boosting Mermails on the ban list shows any likelihood of the rumored new Atlantean support, or do you think Konami just wanted to bring back an old deck? I think that Konami thought that Mermails would be less of a threat now that Diamond Dust is coming. I think that the Atlantean support is highly likely, but I think it's also highly likely to be an OCG exclusive. The Anarchist asks, in the next right YouTuber, how did you send your videos to Underworld's channel to be uploaded? A lot of the time when we do guest uploads, we have a person upload a video as unlisted, and then they send us a link, and then we download the video with download software, and then we upload it again. A. Jemison3 asks, will Infernoids be competitive? Probably not. He also asks, do you think we will get E-Hero Blazeman in the structure deck, since we don't have a replacement for Stratos as of right now, and they can't just give us banned cards? I think it is plausible, but I think it's more likely that we're going to get it in something like Premium Gold or another set like that. Yugi Old asks, does Kawaki Meru Overdose make Rockstun a viable rogue strategy? Rockstun still relies way too much on its normal summon and doesn't produce enough advantage on its own. Hades X736 asks, what's your opinion on Rarity? Like spending heaps of money for an ulti effect Baylor or just using a common one? It depends. If you just want to use the card, then that's fine. But if it's a card that you think you're going to have for a long time, and you want it to be a nice rarity, I say go for it. Mega Man Ian Prime asks, if you could take any one card off the ban list, what would it be? I would probably take Zen Mighty off the ban list. I'd probably put that to 1. 2, how would you balance out BA via the ban list? I'd hit Fire Lake. Sir Nova asks, what do you think Volcanic Control can be competitive after we get Magazine in the TCG? I think that it could be really good. I think Magazine is an amazing card. Sijim Trom asks, how do you think the format would look if Fire and Ice Hand were Light and Dark Hand? I think that BLS and Chaos Sorcerer would be banned, and Shadows would probably run them. Lewis McKay asks, RJ, what do you think of Shadow plants? I think that there's very little synergy except Glow Up Bolt. Team Fully Charged asks, waffles or pancakes? This is an important and a very difficult question. I really like them both. I ultimately would have to go with waffles because their texture is better for combining with other flavors, particularly less sweet flavors. Cody Jenkins asks, what are some good cards for Satellar Knights to side against Necroz? I would say Effect Negation, particularly Fiendish Chain, since you can recycle it with Triver. I would also consider putting in Mind Drain or Imperial Iron Wall. Finally, Uriel Diaz asks, what do you think of Dark Matter Dragon and how strong will Dragon Rulers be after they get the card here in the TCG? I think that it's really good in Mythic Rulers, however I don't think it will make Mythic Rulers competitive. Mythic Rulers just have to get more plays in order to be competitive, and just adding more potential to put dragons in the graveyard is not necessarily going to do the trick. So that's the Q&A. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you did, let me know why in the comment section below, and of course, if you have any questions you want me to ask during the next Q&A video, ask me in the comment section. I cannot guarantee that it will get answered, but I'll try to answer as many as possible within my time limits. Thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.